So while I'm waiting for a video to upload on a completely unrelated subject, I figured I'd talk about this cow flatulence thing that I'm seeing coming up. And we just want to say that this is to establish a precedent or a mechanism, or both, really, to be able to tax the flatulent of human beings. If they can somehow meter the cow farts and then tax them as a result, then they will have established a mechanism to do that for anything else that produces methane gas from its rear end, including people. So think about this, and I don't know what a cow weighs offhand. I really don't. I don't know if it's 600 pounds or 800 pounds or what. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that an 800-pound cow produces X amount of methane gas over the course of a month. Okay. And let's say they establish that the tax rate for that is going to be $5 a month, okay, for an 800-pound cow fart. And then let's say and extrapolate that to a 200-pound human adult male. Well, if an 800-pound cow fart results in X value of tax revenue per month, then a 200-pound human fart is going to result in a Y amount of taxable revenue. So let's say, what was it, $5 for an 800-pound cow? I'm sorry, $5. $5 for an 800-pound cow. Actually, now that I think about it, let's make it $4 a month for a human cow flatulent tax rate for an 800-pound cow. Got it? 200-pound human. Okay, divide that, it's a factor of 4 there. So we're going to say $1 per month for a human flatulence tax for the methane that we produce as humans. $12 a year. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. That's besides the point. This is the simple fact that we're going to tax a human bodily function that we have zero control over whatsoever. We don't even tax food in the grocery store, for crying out loud. Notwithstanding, sure, we tax food in restaurants and all that sort of thing because there's a service tied to the preparation of the food there. And that's why we don't tax groceries. There's no service, in preparation of that to go and buy grapes and milk and bread and all the other stuff that we purchase in a supermarket, for crying out loud. And here they're going to basically set up a mechanism to tax a bodily function of humans. Well, you know what? Why stop there? Once we've established that and people have gotten used to it in a reasonable tax rate, they're not really feeling the pain here. Well, we can also go ahead and establish a tax rate for the frickin' air that we breathe. I mean, people have joked about this. Oh, if they could figure out a way to tax the air. You know what? It's called, well, a 100-pound or a 120-pound human breathes roughly this amount of air in a particular period of time. Well, they can extrapolate that across different sizes of people who live different lifestyles. We've had metrics established for a long time now of what a sedentary lifestyle is like versus an active lifestyle and all that sort of stuff. You extrapolate that with the database that we're getting in hospitals now, where people question how much exercise, not people, nurses, nursing assistants ask you questions on what kind of active lifestyle you might have. How much exercise do you do in a week? Do you smoke? Do you swim? Do you do this? Do you do that? Now, lately, it used, well, let's go back in the past. In the near past, I used to get handed a clipboard and a sheet of paper, or a few sheets usually, and check boxes and things that I'd have to scribble in, and most of which they couldn't read. My handwriting's shot anyway. And lately, over the last year or so, they don't hand me a clipboard anymore. Instead, when I go into the exam room, they're sitting at a computer terminal and they're typing this stuff into a database. A database. This information is being stored somewhere. Now, let me tell you, in my professional life, I work with a lot of customers who work with these types of systems, and not just in hospitals. Primarily, it's in other types of systems in retail and industry and all that manner of things, but it's the same crap at the end of the day. It's a database. It's capturing information. It is reporting on this information in all sorts of different ways that people might want to report on it. Healthcare is no different in this regard. Now, true, it does have a mechanism called HIPAA. All right, it's the Health Privacy Act stuff, basically. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, and quite frankly, I don't really care. The point is that HIPAA is there to safeguard our personally identifiable information and very intimate and private details about our health. Our health. Okay. Now, is this information safeguarded? Yes. Can it be shared with certain things? Well, I don't know. I mean, the short answer is yes, it can be, but it depends on certain circumstances and rules. And to find out what those rules are, you have to dig into these things and find out. Now, ostensibly, Obamacare allowed the mechanism by which the Health and Human Services Department of the U.S. government can dig into some of these metrics. And sure, maybe they can't tie specific data to specific individuals, but that's now. Those things can be changed by a change in the law, a change in regulations, and most of the time we're simply not going to know. I mean, unless we're paying attention, who has the time for that? This data is already captured, it's already living on databases. Who's to say that next month, next year, 10 years from now, that they decide to build a reports that are tied to specific individuals on their health and blah, 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 blah. That's where this stuff can very easily end up. And there are compelling reasons to do this. There are reasons to do it to help lower healthcare costs, to better understand where the money's going, to better control and make sure that people are getting the right amount of care and not too much. Or if we want to take a slightly negative and darker stance on these things, sure. Could you establish criteria for death panels and all that? Why not? What is to stop that stuff to actually happen? There's no physical mechanism or anything to stop that from happening. Our government and our regulatory agencies and stuff are the only mechanisms to stop something like that from ultimately occurring. Okay, do you have faith in your government to that extent? Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're up in the air. The point is, if you can regulate cow flatulence, it starts to set up a precedent and a mechanism to regulate all manner of things that actually relate to our day-to-day activities and even those activities that we cannot control. And that is why this cow flatulence thing is, sure, it's kind of a ha-ha funny thing, and how crazy are these liberal Democrats, socialist Democrats. But you know what? They know what they're doing. They're a little bit more clever than we sometimes give them credit for. And this is why they must be opposed and this stuff must be stopped. It opens up the door to some really interesting and nasty things later on down the line. So it's just time for people to stop going along with this nonsense. It's time for the enablers, and by that I mean the people who are kind of on the fence or even marginally on the Democrat side, who just, oh, well, it couldn't happen here, or that's just ridiculous. Kind of reminds me of one of my grandmothers, oh, well, people would never do something like that. People do all kinds of messed up crap, and you only have to look in history to find out what kind of messed up stuff we're actually capable of. And we haven't really changed that much. We like to think that we're evolved. Not really. Okay, it's kind of like the plastic wrap and the steak you get at the supermarket. It looks nice, it's in the plastic, everything's nice and clean. That doesn't change the fact that if you want to be honest about it, kind of a brutal act occurred in order for that nice clean steak to end up in that nice clean packaging that you're picking up in the supermarket. Now, I'm old enough to remember what a butcher market or butcher store actually looked like, with a carcass there. And granted, it had already been drained of blood, but I know what that looks like. I know what happens in a slaughterhouse that ultimately results in that thing. That has not changed. And we can put whatever veneer and nice sanitized, outward appearance on things that we want. But the fact is, there's some very brutal things that we're capable of, and not just against animals. Okay, that's one thing. And I'm certainly not a PETA guy, unless you consider that, yes, I am a person who eats tasty animals. Granted, I'm guilty. But the brutality that people are able to commit against other people, regardless, or depending on the circumstances and the things that they find themselves in, That hasn't really changed, period. So it's time for people to start pulling their heads out of their rear and realize that, you know what, some of these things, just because we can, doesn't mean we should. And sometimes, maybe even more often than not, there are good reasons why we should not. And we should not regulate cow flatulence for the very simple reason, not because it's kind of a ridiculous, silly idea, but because of the things that it starts to set up, the mechanisms and the precedents that it sets up to be able to go beyond that and start to apply that to other things, including us.